Good evening. Welcome once again to Matters of Faith, our weekly look at the central place that faith occupies in our lives. More properly, perhaps, it is an inquiry, an ongoing and open-ended interrogation. Who are we? What are we doing here? How did we get here? Where do we go from here? Professors of science tell us the answers, yet each passing day only brings us proof that science is a shallow pretender when it comes to explaining our place in the universe. Unless, of course, this science is tempered by a measure of poetry. Call it poetry, call it insight, call it speculative genius, call it what you will. But there's always a small gap between what can be demonstrated and what is perceptible. What we feel is far larger than what we can see, and what we can see in its turn far exceeds what we can prove. Faith enables us to bridge this gap by turning our gaze inwards. The solution to the riddles of the universe lies perhaps within us. As Victor Hugo said, there is one spectacle that is grander than the sea, and that is the sky. There is one spectacle that is grander than the sky, and that is the interior of the soul. In the Pilgrim's Progress segment of tonight's episode of Matters of Faith, we will visit the Andava Dargah at Nagaur, built to honor the memory of a saint whose soul was indeed a spectacle, grander than the sea and the sky, Hazrat Sayyid Shahul Hamid Qadir Ali.
In all of India, perhaps no single other region is as studded with shrines of all faiths as the Kaveri Delta. The entire atmosphere is charged with a religiosity so transparent and pure that it would make a bhakt out of the staunchest non-believer. This could also explain why the major shrines in the area are almost non-denominational. And none illustrates this more strikingly than the Dargah at Nagaur by the seashore. The site marks the grave of the 18th century saint known to the thousands who gather there as Hazrat Sayyid Shahul Hamid Qadir Ali. Shahul Hamid's parents, Hasan Quddus Sahib and Bibi Fatima, lived in the village of Mankapur in Uttar Pradesh. The story goes that the saint's mother saw a dream in which a celestial voice announced to her that she would soon be blessed with a son who would attract the reverence and faith of innumerable thousands. By the time he was 8 years old, he had mastered Arabic and revealed wondrous spiritual leanings. His parents sent him to Gwalior, where he became a disciple of the great Sufi saint Sayyid Muhammad Ghaus Sahib. After spending 10 years with his teacher, Shahul Hamid moved back briefly to his native village. There, he began a journey that took him all over South and West Asia before bringing him to Nagaur. A number of miracles are attributed to him. It is said that during the course of his travels, he made the mute speak, enabled the lame to walk, made the barren fertile, and raised the dead from the grave. Not surprisingly, he attracted a great following, not only among Muslims, but also among Hindus and Sikhs. On his return from Sri Lanka, the saint reached Thanjavur. Word reached him that the Raja of Thanjavur was prey to an incurable wasting disease. The story goes that when Shahul Hamid went to the palace, he discovered that an evil spell had been cast on the king. His powers enabled him to break the spell and cure the king. In gratitude, the Raja bestowed on the holy man a piece of land by the seashore at Nagaur, where the saint remained until his death in the middle of the 18th century. Far from extinguishing or diminishing the saint's following, death only seemed to enhance it. One of Raja Achutappa Nayak's successors, Tulasi Maharaja, endowed the Dargah with 15 villages and 4,000 acres of land to ensure that the memorial built for the saint would be able to maintain itself. Another built the highest of the 5 minarets that adorn the shrine. Neither the marble tiles nor the towering minarets built by the wealthy and the powerful can account for the shrine's mystique. The explanation lies more in the acts, prayers, and faith of millions of worshippers from all castes and creeds who congregate here every Thursday, as they have done for the last 300 years or more, seeking the blessings of Hazrat Sayyid Shahul Hamid Qadir Ali.
From Nagaur, we move to the next part of our yatra, to the northernmost part of the Bay of Bengal, to Bandul, a former Portuguese settlement, where at the shrine of Guruma, patroness of mariners, we offer humble worship.
Around the meandering course of the Hooghly, north of Calcutta, lie a number of former colonial settlements like Chandarnagar, Chinsura and Barrackpur. As the sun set on the British and all other empires, the importance of these places declined. There was only one exception, the former Portuguese settlement of Bandul. Bandul is home to the oldest Christian shrine in eastern India, known officially as the Basilica of Our Lady of Happy Voyage, or quite simply, as the Church of Guruma. The church was first established as an Augustine monastery in 1599 during the reign of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. Stained glass windows inside the church beautifully recapture the checkered history of Bandul. Jahangir's son Shah Jahan never forgave the Portuguese for refusing him any assistance in his rebellion against his father. In 1632, Mughal troops laid siege to the fort of Bandul. The Portuguese resistance was broken after nearly a month. Thousands were taken prisoner, churches and public buildings were razed to the ground. The Bandul monastery itself was only slightly damaged, but 5 Augustine monks were taken captive, amongst them the aged Father Joao da Cruz. Shah Jahan decreed that the aged friar would be crushed to death by a wild elephant in a public execution witnessed by the citizenry of Agra. The story goes that on the appointed day, the fierce beast bowed reverently before the priest and refused to carry out the emperor's bidding. The humbled Shah Jahan promptly freed Father da Cruz and granted him the land around Bandul as a fief. Immediately after returning to Bengal, the priest set out to rebuild the church, and soon Bandul became once again the hub of Christianity in eastern India. Legend has it that the special significance of the shrine arises from the miraculous reappearance of the statue of Our Lady of Happy Voyage. Up till the siege of 1632, this statue had adorned the altar of the chapel in the Bandul fort. When fighting broke out, Tiago, a young Portuguese mariner who was trying to carry the statue to safety across the river, was shot in the attempt. Neither he nor the statue was sighted again. But early one day, when the church was being rebuilt, the villagers discovered to their joy that the Hooghly had brought the statue back to Bandul. The restoration of the statue to its birthplace is believed to have happened just a day after Father da Cruz had seen a strange light on the river and heard a celestial voice cry, "Hail, hail, hail to Our Lady of Happy Voyage, who has given us victory." Father de Cruz had the statue installed on the main altar of the church and instituted a special feast to commemorate the recovery of the statue. Even as the feast was being celebrated, a large Portuguese ship sailed into the port. The captain of the vessel recounted how he and his crew had survived a terrible storm in the Bay of Bengal by praying to the Blessed Virgin, vowing to make a suitable offering if the ship reached safe shores. As a votive offering, the skipper cut one mast of his ship and installed it in front of the church, where it still stands today. The Bandel Church was elevated to a basilica in 1988. Worshippers drawn from a number of faiths congregate here every day to seek the blessings of Guru Ma, Our Lady of Happy Voyage.
When we are clever, when we are cleverer, we think. When we are intelligent, we speak. When we are lucid, we write poetry. But it is only when we attain knowledge that we hear that unfathomable speech we call music. Music leads us to the edge of the infinite and lets us gaze into it for some moments. The Rig Veda imparts that power to gaze into the infinite to all those who utter it, and even those privileged enough to hear it.
Music, says George Santayana, is a means of giving form to our inner feelings without attaching them to events or objects in the world. That the ancient Indians had such an elevated conception of the power of sound is evident from the very notion of Nada Brahma, when sound is not only a means of attaining Brahman or the Absolute, but in fact becomes the Absolute. Sanskrit, according to the ancients, was not a mere language, but an emanation of being, Sat, in sound, Shabd. Thus, Vedic mantras and hymns, believed to touch the very essence of truth, become also vehicles of divine power and magic. And none is more sacred than the 1028 hymns of the Rig Veda, the world's oldest religious text, probably composed some 3,500 years ago. The center of Vedic worship was ritual sacrifice, complex rites involving the worship of Agni, the god of fire, and the appeasement of a number of Vedic deities like Indra, Varuna, and Yama. And the most redoubtable of them all, Rudra, the Howler. Rudra is an early manifestation of Shiva, but his status in the Rig Veda is nowhere near as exalted as it subsequently became. He is spoken of as a mountain-dwelling archer whose occasional arrows rain disease and disaster on humankind. His remote and ascetic nature is described with awe. Yet, like Varuna, the major deity of the Vedic era, Rudra too has a generous aspect. He holds the secrets to the mountain herbs that cure disease. Rudra was the god who was believed capable of breathing life into what seemed destined to perish. A combination of all these attributes may have led to Rudra or Shiva being identified later as the one god who embodied the entire cosmic cycle, including the origin of the feminine principle, Prakriti, from the formless Purusha. Such is the power and the wrath of Rudra that not even repeating his name through the Rudramala or the garland of names will suffice to appease him. Rudra demands total surrender and loss of self from the devotee. The shloka goes, "A man should not meditate on Rudra without himself becoming Rudra, nor take the name of Rudra by uttering the Rudramala without becoming Rudra, nor will he attain Rudra without becoming Rudra." The celebration of the might of this Vedic manifestation of Shiva continues to this day. Now, as it did several thousand years ago, the utterance of Rudra's name helps believers concentrate, find focus, and draw closer to Godhead.
Bhakti is the dissolution of the ego in the ocean of faith. The true bhakta is indissociable from the object of his bhakti. As the Bhagavad Gita says, a man consists of the faith that is in him. Whatever his faith is, he is. India's tradition of venerating holy men as a way of venerating God derives doubtless from the application of this principle. The saint is looked upon as a bridge between the worldly and the divine, and nowhere does one see this more clearly than in the life of the 17th century saint Tukaram, and in the following he continues to inspire today.
Tukaram was born in 1608 to the peasants Balhoba and Kanki, who lived in the little village of Dehu, just outside Pune. Members of the Gosavi sect, his family believed that spiritual attainment was in no way related to one's place in the social order. In later years, Tukaram would demonstrate this very truth by referring to himself as Shudra Kundi. From his poems, it would appear that Tukaram spent a happy childhood in affluent surroundings, amidst the affection showered on him by his parents and siblings. Married when barely into his teens, Tukaram settled into the comfortable life of a mildly prosperous householder. Then came the Great Famine. Thousands perished in the region. Green and bountiful fields were reduced to stretches of scrub and wasteland. The calamity was to transform Tukaram. The famine claimed the life of his son, made a nagging shrew of his wife. The family was reduced to rack and ruin. He turned to Panduranga, patron god of Pandharpur, almost as if he was seeking an explanation for such divine wrath. Tukaram came, at this time, under the influence of the Chaitanya cult, founded by Raghav Chaitanya in the 15th century. He began to distance himself from the material and the mundane. His mission lay elsewhere, and he knew it. He tore up his titles to the family's property, gave away his personal belongings, and set out for Pandharpur. By now, Tukaram had begun to attract a tidy little following. The devout gathered in growing numbers to hear the soul-stirring abhangas and kirtans that sprang from the lips of this intriguing saint-poet. but the saint himself seemed oblivious to his patient little flock. He sought instead the darshan of Vitthal in the silence of the soul, in the solitude of the heart. He retired to the forest, vowing not to return until Vitthal revealed himself. For a full fortnight, in the biting cold of the Deccan air, amidst the beasts and bandits of the Bhamnath hills, Tukaram prayed, sang, raised his voice to the heavens, entreating, imploring his beloved Vithoba to descend. He was not to be disappointed. Vithoba was revealed to him. Tukaram returned to Pandharpur and sang, "Trees and creepers and beasts have become my kin. The birds too sing in their sweet voice. Due to this pleasure, this day of solitude has become dear to me. No qualities, good or bad, affect the body. The canopy of heaven and the throne of the soil, I would move wherever the mind loves to." Tukaram's fame spread. Pilgrims thronging at Pandharpur for a darshan of Vithoba stayed back for a glimpse of the saint poet. Shivaji, the great Maratha king, sent him costly presents. Tukaram returned them, for all he desired was the eternal darshan of Panduranga. The sight of the Shudra saint, who preferred to praise the Lord in Marathi and not in Sanskrit, and the immense following he attracted, raised the hackles of the orthodox. They accused Tukaram of sharing the secrets of the Shastras with the lowborn. It was a charge to which the saint cheerfully pleaded guilty. His manuscripts were thrown into the Indrayani river. The river refused to allow them to be washed away. A few days later, she bore up the documents, pure and untouched. In the early hours of one morning in 1650, a celestial vehicle descended on Pandharpur and transported Tukaram to Vaikuntha. As Tukaram swayed in ecstasy, in the bliss of the fusion of his soul with the Absolute, there was a blinding flash of light. All those present shut their eyes for an instant, as they quailed in awe and fear. When they opened their eyes, their Guru Sant Tukaram was gone. Higher still and higher, from the earth dost thou spring, like a cloud of fire, into the blue, deep blue, dost thou take wing.
The worship of God, says the philosopher Alfred North Whitehead, is an adventure of the spirit, a flight after the unattainable. The very faith that prompts this adventure of the spirit also inspires doubt. For faith, like the wag says, embraces itself as well as doubts about itself. Too often, however, we interpret the freedom to doubt not as a philosophical liberty, but as the freedom to question, run down, or even annihilate someone else's faith. The pages of history record more deaths from religious intolerance and fanaticism than from famine and disease. And this, even though all religions call upon their followers to shed hatred and intolerance. We would do well to heed what the Sufi Ibn al-Arabi tells us. If the follower of any particular religion understood that the color of the water is the color of the vessel containing it, he would not interfere with the beliefs of others, but would perceive God in every form and in every belief. Thank you for being with us in Matters of Faith. Do join us again next week as we continue our spiritual journey through these myriad colors and forms.